Good day. My name's Graham Gordon Thomas, and I like to think about and investigate through my mind's eye and the knowledge what's readily available for equally on the net for everyone in the world. And that is why the academy and the archaeologists at the universities and in the institutions carry on and don't want to know about advanced ancient civilizations. It's simple. One simple answer. They're all into debt. They're all in debt for property or investments or status or ego, and they're trapped into this system through some sort of contract. That means they've signed away their freedom and their right to question. So it's no longer scientific institutes anymore, so much as they've created an orthodoxy controlled by financial inducement. You have to ask the question, when was money invented? Money is one way of having a transaction between what we do for a living and the services we want, and it's a brilliant system. But it also has a negative side effect, that these days money has now become more valuable than life itself. And that's why in America they lock up millions of people to work as slaves in factories, what are called jails, for small crimes, when the really major criminals are inflating the cost of real estate, making it difficult for people to make ends meet even if they are working, or two people working to pay their rents and bills. When those people in charge of government, all they're doing is taking advantage of their position to then disadvantage more and more people in a very greater in proportion as time goes on. Those with the power in the Western systems, America, Australia, England, is more and more entrenched, so they've got more and more control over the finances of the country, and therefore the financial destiny of the majority of the people. So therefore democracy no longer works for the majority of the people, but in fact for the minority of the people who control all the financial systems, or are involved politicians into these financial systems through some inducement or other, or maybe they've got them over the barrel, like Cambridge Analytica said. They know something about them, so they can use that as blackmail to get their own way and coerce them. And this is why when we reflect on ancient civilizations, what were pre-Inca, pre-last ice age, then maybe the reason they don't want you to know that because it was a pre-monetary system. But how did that work? How did a pre-monetary system work? Well, it works through a sort of massive cooperation between all the people. You have your elite, you have your preachers and your priests, and you have your people, or they're supposed to be spiritually connected to the gods, and they've got this knowledge. Then they use that knowledge to guide society, and society lives within some sort of moral principles guided by the science and art and theology of the leaders. Now, the leaders we have now cannot be said to have moral principles, regardless how the press publicises it, oh, what good, clean, beautiful people they have to be a politician, because for quite a few generations now they've been involved intrinsically in creating massive amount of debts in our countries to furnish their real estate aspirations at the cost of the people in the future. So these people haven't given a damn about the young. And that's a counter-intuitive to evolution itself in some ways, other than the fact that you have enclaves, parochial enclaves, that will look after their own and breed in advantages for themselves, which is basic Darwinianism, and that's sort of social engineering. And then they use education, or the lack of, and therefore there's a eugenics of the intellect happening through political correctness. It might sound a bit complex and convoluted to connect that with ancient civilizations, but I say, and I'm suggesting, the reason academy and the forces that be don't like the idea of being challenged by the people that are now going to see the sites, archaeological sites themselves, and saying, well, you know, making their own conclusions, because archaeology is not a science. But there's one thing that I've always been aware of as an evolutionist, which I am, is that ever since I was a kid, I realised the seas, I learnt the seas were rising, had risen 300 feet. I automatically understood by the time I was a very young person that much of the evidence pertaining to human development and evolution is lost through ice ages, through massive flooding, and through the erosion of millions of square miles of land which is nearest the coast or within the seas themselves, now submerged below them because of seas rising. So when scientists say, paleontologists say, humanity began 200,000 years ago, it's purely, utterly speculative. It's purely speculative. You can't say that because there's so much evidence we can't collect. And I've got enormous amount of respect for Mr. Leakey especially. I really have. This guy's a wonderful man. I followed him all my life. But nonetheless, I'm suggesting there's a big story missing because of the 300 foot of sea rises and massive amounts of ice ages and catastrophes that have buried the evidence. But the mathematical point is this: if they're saying in 5,000 years we can go from hunter-gathering to building mega cities like New York or anywhere else and wherever else we've built, then it stands to reason in 5,000 years, if we can go back 200,000 years, the humans were as intelligent, our school sizes were the same then as they are now. What's to say they couldn't have done it before on a couple of previous occasions? Because the length of time it takes to understand the movement of the stars and the cycles, and to study astronomy and astrology and create the charts they have, takes an awful long time. To ignore that is to ignore what is irrefutable evidence of a long-term examination of the environment, if you like, and that's what you just include it, or include the whole thing in environment. But I'm suggesting that is why there's a big hole in the story. Academic and in the institutions, universities, are afraid to have it filled because there's something controlling them, because they don't want the people, the demos, the plebeians, to wake up to the fact maybe there's a more spiritual way of being that runs society in a much more human way than is now being developed through the failure of politicians to understand economics is all about social well-being, not financial gain of the few, and the trickle-down effect and the massive amount of debt the future has to repay for the largesse of fewer and fewer people. Anyway, my name's Graham Gordon Thomas, and I just like to put some insight onto something that I have been studying the whole of my life. Evolution of humanity and all the holistic meanings of that beyond just the mutation of species itself. It's one of the secrets they don't want you to know. Beware of those who say deny evolution, because they actually are denying what is an intrinsic way of understanding what is actually happening within society now and actually what has happened in the past. Thank you. Have a good day.